African Americans in Kentucky have a long history of connecting labor activism with the broader struggle for civil rights. To generations of Black Kentuckians past and present, organized labor equality has been rooted in the basic struggle to lead a dignified life despite the weight of legalized segregation, racism, and other forms of discrimination. Black laborers have organized not only to secure better working conditions, but to bridge the racial divide and allow all workers to identify with their common humanity. Although the Civil War abolished slavery and conferred citizenship upon formerly enslaved people, Black Kentuckians still faced considerable barriers to organize. They faced a white population hostile to the idea of competing with Black individuals for jobs. Vagrancy laws, which were enacted by white lawmakers, also restricted the movement of the Black community. These inequalities meant that Black workers were mostly excluded from white labor unions that emerged in the late 19th century. In Bowling Green, only 10 of 500 organized workers were Black. The United Mine Workers technically welcomed Black miners, yet company owners in eastern and western Kentucky often hired Black miners as scabs to fuel racial animosity and divide workers. Black workers instead formed their own labor organizations. In 1869, only 1 year after ratification of the 14th Amendment, Black workers organized a convention in Louisville to deal with rampant unemployment. The Barbers' Union in Louisville, for example, became so powerful that they forced white barbers to negotiate and set shop hours. Black educators also organized the Colored Teachers State Association in 1877, the first Black teachers group organized in the South. Other Black workers formed unions for waiters, coachmen, teamsters, porters, and bricklayers. Smaller numbers of Black Kentuckians overcame the power of Jim Crow and entered the middle and professional classes as doctors, lawyers, ministers, morticians, postal workers, and extension agents. In Henderson, for example, a healthy number of Black tailors, shoemakers, and barbers in the early 20th century thrived, and some even served white customers. As civil rights struggles intensified during the 20th century, labor leaders believed the right to unionize was an integral part of securing racial equality. No Kentuckian embodied this belief more than W.C. Young, a labor leader, civil rights activist, lifelong Sunday school teacher, and community organizer. Born in Paducah in 1919, Young became a union member of the Brotherhood of Railway Clerks in 1941 and was a lifelong member of the local NAACP. He advised President Kennedy on civil rights legislation and later visited all 50 states as a regional director for the AFL-CIO. W.C. Young spent his career fighting against workplace inequalities that African Americans had endured since the end of the Civil War, and this work continues today. Black Kentuckians continue to build multiracial and multi-generational organizations for better conditions, including the Louisville Tenants Union, founded in 2022. Throughout Kentucky history, civil rights activists have worked to highlight the crucial role of Black laborers in advancing the state's economy. Their stories show us that Black history is American history and an important part of Kentucky history.
Thank you all very much, and thanks to the team for putting the Moments in History video together for use this year. Welcome to the Kentucky Historical Society. I am Scott Alvey, Executive Director. I have the privilege of leading this organization that has been collecting, preserving, and sharing Kentucky's story since 1836. Our mission is to educate and engage the public through Kentucky history in order to meet the challenges of the future. When I get to stand in front of crowds like this, one of the things that I find myself often talking about is the role of history and the value that we have in history and why we have a state historical society. And I like to remind people of a few things about history. One of them is that history, as this video has displayed, is a great contextual piece for our upcoming conversation. It gives us a little background as to about where we've been so that we can have some conversations about where we want to go. I also want to talk a little bit about history and the fact that I don't want people to we often talk about hearing great stories or going to a great museum experience, but history's complex. And so what do we think when we think about history? What are we thinking about? It's not just about stories. It's not about myths and memories and things like that. It's about this opportunity for us to look at how these intended consequences, these ideas that we have created, how do we analyze those to see what was your intended consequence from this, but what actually ended up happening? So I think it's a great piece for us for today to kind of think about that. It changes us or charges us to consider multiple perspectives. We also need to recognize where history has guided us and empowered us. It provides us a moment not to only share our stories, but to hear each other's stories. So history is not always just about the past. The conversations of the panel last week tended to look a lot about how we were teaching history in our public education institutions or in the education institutions at large. Today, we have an opportunity to bring this conversation to a public history organization, a place where we can continue our education beyond the classroom. So as a public history organization, we often have to consider multiple perspectives. When you were coming into the classroom, we kind of know what we're going to talk about, and you have a good idea. To be honest, I'm not quite certain why you all chose to come today. Maybe this was a great lunchtime opportunity for you. Maybe you're bringing some friends here to share something about Kentucky's black labor movement. Maybe you already know a whole lot about the topics that we're going to experience today, but you wanted to kind of come to a place where you felt very safe to engage and learn more about it. Maybe you know about our panelists who are here today, and you're looking for that opportunity to come hear their personal stories and their perspective. But what's our goal? Our goal here today is to make sure that these conversations continue, that these moments to engage with Kentucky's black history doesn't stop on February 28th. But here's your assignment. What will you do with this experience today? No matter your motivation for being here, we hope you use this opportunity to create this deeper understanding and to do something with it. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our friend, Senator Gerald Neal.
Good morning. This ain't church, huh? Good morning. It's still not church, but that's okay. First of all, let me just start off and say that I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you, Scott, for hosting the event. I want to make sure everyone understands that this is a collaboration between the Kentucky Black Legislative Caucus and the Kentucky Historical Society. We have some history together and working together, but we're going to move it up a notch. But this is also an event that is the third part of our Black History series this year. And of course, we adopt that same phrase that Black history is American history and indeed Kentucky history. So it's very important, very fitting for us to be here today to do what we're going to do here and start with the subject matter that we're starting with today. And we're talking about that struggle from going from slavery to freedom and the journey to realize the American dream, which is still ongoing. But guess what? In that journey, there were many blessings. Oh yes, great trials and tribulations, lives lost in that struggle. But advancement, understanding, coming together, working together, creating a standard, raising high ideals, and making those a reality. That's what this is all about. It's about reaching across. It's about not only talking, but it's about listening carefully. All of us are burdened by the past. All of us are burdened by this past. But then again, in life, we're all blessed by the opportunity to grab a hold of that past and the current reality and make it something beautiful, or should I say more beautiful, because in the midst of all that, what we call struggle, some of which is very distasteful, guess what? There are gems of beauty that exist today that are in this room right now. And they're around this country and they're around the world. And we must grab for that. I do want to say also that I think it's important to acknowledge the historical period we're in, my perspective. And my perspective is we're in a period of reaction. Now, that's nothing new. I run into people all the time. They kind of depressed with the narrative that's taking place. But as my dad used to always tell me, I'm always quoting my dad, Union guy. He said, in every circumstance, there is opportunity. Seize it. In other words, don't sit and bemoan the fact that there's a struggle all around you, that things don't go the way you anticipate they will be. You grab it and then you make it happen with others. And persistence is the key there. So I didn't read anything that I had prepared. It's a problem that I have quite often. I do want to point out that we're very excited, the Kentucky Black Legislative Caucus, and what we're doing. This is our 21st year. We initially dealt with, let's bring everybody to the center of government, the rotunda in the Capitol, and we did that year after year. Think about it. We bring the governor, we bring the Supreme Court, we bring the leaders of the legislative branches in the same spot, in the iconic, symbolic center of government to talk about what? Black history and what it is and what it means to America, what it means to Kentucky, and what it means to each and every individual regardless of their perspective. So that's what our opportunity is here. This is the joy we have. I come here and I speak on behalf of our chairman, Representative George Brown. I serve as vice chair of the Kentucky Black Legislative Caucus. It's my pleasure to be here, and I welcome you, and thank you so very much.
Oh, there we go. Now you can hear me. I'm an old newspaper reporter. You understand this technical stuff is beyond my comprehension. I used to carry a notepad and a pencil. You all know what those are? Yeah. Anyway, I am the webmaster editor for the state AFL-CIO. I'm a retired professor of history. They call it Professor Emeritus. I call it Old Geezer at Paducah, well, West Kentucky Community Technical College in Paducah. I'm very honored to be here. I talked to Mr. Williams last night on the phone, and he is what we used to call in my newspaper days good copy. He's the kind of interview that you just ask one question and he takes it from there, and those are the absolute best. I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation last night. I'd like to begin, though, with one quick observation. Black history is American history, indeed it is. It's also labor history. And I was particularly enjoying the video presentation of my good friend W.C. Young, and Jeff Wiggins in the back knew W.C. Tremendous person. The highest honor that the Western Kentucky AFL-CIO Area Council awards is the W.C. Young Award. And back there in the back, we have the Kentucky State AFL Secretary Treasurer who won that award. Jeff Wiggins, stand up, Jeff, come on. There you go. Okay. Let me begin with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King many, many times said that the labor movement and the civil rights movement were natural allies. And he said this in 1961, speaking to the National AFL-CIO Convention. Our needs are identical with labor's needs: decent wages, fair working conditions, livable housing, old age security, health and welfare measures, conditions in which families can grow, have education for their children, and respect in the community. That is why Negroes support labor's demands and fight laws that curb labor. Now, born in Alabama, 17 miles from the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
Yes.
Came to Louisville, graduated from Central High School, started packing a Union card in 1964, then you, at the old International Harvester plant. Then you go to Ford. Talk about Louisville in the 1960s. It's Jim Crow still.
Yes, in the 60s, there was still Jim Crow. There were still places, especially in labor, in factories. They had two kind of jobs. They had jobs called black jobs and white jobs. And if you was black, you could not get that job, even though you knew that job and could do that job. But it was called black and white jobs. At Harvester, when I started there in '64, after extended 2-year duty in the U.S. Army from '62 to '64. There was in the foundry, because of the hard work, the nasty work, the dirty work, those are black jobs. And then there was other jobs called white jobs, where it was piece work where you made more money and it was easier. So after a year and a half at Harvester, I was in the union, but I had
That was the United Auto Workers.
the United Auto Workers, but I did not have a seat at the table. And why I'm saying the seat at the table, I did not have was to make decision on what we done within the plant, working condition, and what we could do, the negotiating on our pay, our vacation, etc.
So there were two UAW locals at Harvester, one for the foundry workers and one for other workers, right?
Right.
Was there a joint executive board, or did each union have its own e-board?
Each union had their own e-board.
Okay. So then you go on to Ford and talk about that.
Well,
You're now with 862.
I went UAW Local 862. When I arrived in '65, I was just a member of the UAW 865. Well, Skip, I didn't really get involved in the union till 1972. I was asked to join, back then we called it the Fair Practice Committee, and which is the Civil Rights Committee. I was asked to join because we had been fighting for quite a while. The National says every local should have a Civil Rights Committee and a chairperson. And what that was, to investigate cases of discrimination. And to investigate cases of discrimination, you know, the Civil Rights Bill wasn't passed until '65. And based on Title VII, and you had to know what it was based on, race, religion, etc. And our job was to investigate when somebody sent a complaint in through the union that they were discriminated against. And I moved forward. In 1974, the person that was civil rights chair then, he had moved up a little bit in the union. He became a person on the bargaining committee. And they asked me, would I chair the civil rights committee? I accepted. Now, it's a difference between getting elected to a job and being appointed to a job. I was not elected, I was appointed. And I had to work, but when there was a case, then I would get off, look at it. I have my people that was on the committee to do the investigation. of the case. It was kind of a tough job. At that time, when I went to Ford, there was no females working at any Ford plant in Kentucky. They didn't start working there until 1974, after a lawsuit was won and said that they had to hire women at the plant. And that's when we came up, a lot of them come up with the ideas of you had to have so many minorities. A lot of people didn't know the difference between minorities in the civil rights movement and blacks. Minority covered blacks, Mexican, all races. And on top of that, it covered women's. And ladies, did you know y'all was counted twice? If you was black, you was counted as a black, and you was counted as a woman. So that was a problem for my job, because I had to fight the men, both black and white, in the company. Because the men was saying women was coming in taking their jobs. Have y'all heard that before? That was the problem that my job as chairperson at the Kentucky Truck Plant, Local 862, was to do.
Did the black part of the workforce, did it reflect the community itself, or the much, in other words, a certain percentage of blacks lived in Louisville? What percentage of that workforce at the plants were African American?
Very little.
So it did not reflect.
It did not reflect
demographics of the city.
The city. Because at the time, reason it didn't, because our people and our political people and our union people did not recognize, really, we had to fight hard to get the civil rights movement made. And that was a lot of people in Louisville that worked within that department. The NAACP, later the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and others. And Brayton, she was one of the ladies that worked hard to help us get the movement of the civil rights going strong in Louisville, Kentucky.
Exactly. You mentioned A. Philip Randolph Institute. I believe you have some connection to that organization, do you not?
Yes, I am the president of the Louisville chapter.
For how long?
I has been president since 1996, but I've been involved in it for over 40 years.
And of course, he was a well-known labor leader himself, and Baird Rustin helped found the A. Philip Randolph Institute. Did you ever meet him by any chance?
No, I never had a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
But the first president, when they started, was Norm Hill.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Norm Hill and I are close friends now. He's still alive.
Yeah.
And
How old is he now, do you know?
He's in his 90s.
Wow.
And he also just published a book last year. I received the book. Bill Lonigan received the book. And it's a book telling how they came up in labor. And
of course, he also starts out when unions are segregated.
yes, he did.
As well as W.C. Young did as well. We'll continue on with it. So tell us a little bit what the A. Philip Randolph Institute does today.
A. Philip Randolph today is voter registration, voter education, and get out to vote. But that's a year-round job because we have elections. We're nonpartisan, 501c3, we get out and try to educate the people on the importance of registering to vote. We have to educate them on why it's so important to register. Because if you don't register, you cannot vote. And that's the education part. How important it is. What are your interests? You look at our politicians and you find out, what are you doing to help me in my livelihood? You know, between Mr. Randolph and Dr. King and the voters registration and the work they done changed this country. If it hadn't been for them two working. Now, labor played a great part in all of that. Mr. Randolph and Dr. King had an office in Walter Rufus headquarters in Detroit.
And he marched with Dr. King.
Yes. And the first March for Justice was not done in D.C. It was done in Detroit before. And then they had the march in D.C. to make sure that we heard. And see, Mr. Randolph and Brian Ruskins and the other group planned this March for Justice. That was a really name of this march, was the March for Justice. But so happened, Dr. King, they got him to be the guest speaker. And if it hadn't have been for a gospel singer, told him, Martin, tell him about your dream. And the March on Washington became I Have a Dream March. People need to know their history.
They do indeed.
Because a lot of our young people and our middle age people, they don't know all this. So when things happen, they don't have no idea of the struggle that black people and labor people had. The most important thing is, and I'm not gonna quote the whole thing, at the banquet table, there's no reserved seats. You take what you can get and you hold what you can get. If you can't hold anything, you don't get anything. And you can't get anything without organization. That's why in the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the community, and the religious, they got together and they brought us all these hundreds of years to where we are today. But, in my opinion, we need to go back and find out what they done to bring progress to get us here. Find out what we done wrong and try to correct it. If we cannot do that, then we don't know where we're going. They said if you don't know where you've been, you will never know where you're going. And if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it.
You're right. We're about out of time, but talk a little bit about Dr. King and the March on Frankfurt. I know you just got out of the military and you weren't part of that, but talk about some of the people who were in it. Obviously, Dr. King and Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson.
W.C. Young was in it, I know.
W.C. Young was in it. I think Senator Georgia Powell. And quite a few others.
Oh, yeah.
For young people, Raoul Cunningham.
Right.
He's just retired from being the president of the Louisville and Jefferson County NAACP, in which I spent 22 years as second vice president and labor chair.
I'll tell you something. W.C. Young told me years ago, he said, I never go anywhere without my NAACP card and my union card in my wallet. And I think that really encapsulates what Dr. King said. And you know what? I don't either. I've got my union card. I got 2 union cards, AFT, NEA, KEA, NEA, and my NAACP card. My wife and I are lifetime members of the Mayfield chapter, so yes. I think we've got about, 2 minutes left, timekeeper? And your closing thoughts, just wrap this all up.
My closing thoughts is, do you know where you stand now? I'm not talking about just labor and the other organization. Yourself. What do you stand? Do you have any idea of what you can do? We can do nothing by ourselves. We have to be together. If we are divided, we fall. Together, we stand. Yeah. And it's my part that each and every one of us have to look at ourselves, not be selfish and says, I. It's we. What can we do at a time like this? We must come together. Labor, civil rights, the community, and religious. And we cannot leave our political people out, because what we negotiate or we do can be wiped out with the stroke of a pen. Remember that. What we do can be wiped out with a stroke of a pen. Let's not, and I challenge everybody, let's not let this happen. Yeah. Thank you very much.
That was a terrific interview. I'm all newspaper guys. The best ever done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we'll invite the panelists up to come one, come all. You can stay where you are. Thank you,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now we come to our panel discussion. How much time do we have for this? 40 minutes. Okay. Now, you heard the interview I had. No pauses, right through. So don't give me these yes and no answers. Elaborate. Or the crowd will start booing or something. I don't know. So I think we've got a very good panel here to balance out and look at different aspects of organized labor as well as the civil rights movement. I'm going to introduce our panelists. This gentleman here is Bill Lonergan. They call him President Emeritus of the AFL-CIO. Bill, are you an old guy or just, did that work for you? Good. Next to him is Kevin Walton. And of course, Mr. Williams, you know. And over in the other side is Lillian Brents. So let's just do this way. We got 40 minutes. We got 3 panelists. I'm not very good at math, but can you give me time on each one of them? Can we do that? That'll be good. So Bill Lonergan.
Yes, sir.
You talk. You talk.
I get to talk. Well,
Yes, you do.
all right. I get to talk, and I would just like to say welcome to everybody that is here today. I want to recognize our women over here with the Links organization, and thank you for being here. My successor over here, Dustin Reinstedler, my good friend Kurt Gillaward is the president of the Alliance of Retired Americans here in Kentucky, Jeff Wiggins and Lyles, everybody here. I just want to say Bell and have a shout out, and to my great friend Senator Neal for having putting this together and working so diligently on Black History Month and the work that he does with us in the legislature. So what did you say I had? 10 minutes or?
No, let's see, well, come on, somebody do the math. I was a history professor.
Do the math, do the math. Okay, we never want to talk over, but, I wanted to tell you that I'm honored to be here. And one of the greatest thrills of my entire life and my career of over 40 years in the labor movement has been the opportunity to work with labor leaders, African-American labor leaders, that have struggled mightily to build a union movement, to build community, to uplift other workers. When I first started out organizing back in 1981, we went to people's houses. We knocked on their doors. We used to call that house calling. I think they use social media now or something like that. But we used to go out and knock on doors. I got the opportunity to work with the president of the Laborers Local there in Washington, D.C., my old friend Bill Saunders. Bill Saunders was African-American president of the local union. Bill Saunders was a fearless, dedicated, intelligent, committed individual that inspired me and mentored me during my early career in the labor movement. I wanted to give a shout out to Bill Saunders for inspiring me during my entire life and thank him. But there's been so many other African-American labor leaders that have gone unsung that some people know about and others don't, and I've had the incredible opportunity and honor to be exposed to and to work with alongside in solidarity with some of the greatest labor leaders that this country's ever seen. And a lot of them came right here in Kentucky. There's so many that have not been named. There was a gentleman from the Laborers Local in Louisville, Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart stood up for workers no matter what color they were. He was a stalwart that was represented on many boards and active in the community and really led the way for doing a lot of work with the other building trades to break down barriers. I wanted to give a shout out and honor to Jimmy Stewart, which my friends from the Laborers back there may remember Jimmy. He was a great leader back in the 70s. Then we had Willie Lacey. Some people don't know these folks, but I, like I say, had this opportunity to work with them. Willie was an organizer with the Clothing Workers Union. He covered shops all throughout the Commonwealth, from small towns to big towns, and was fearless in his work to organize many women workers as well, African-American workers in the textile mills and the plants. Willie Lacey, another luminary of my memory. Bill Johnson, Brother Bill Johnson, who passed away a few years ago. Bill organized the workers in the grain millers, those that worked in the cereal factories, particularly over in Indiana, was instrumental in building the unions that did not exist before, and was just a strong advocate for labor, somebody that I admired and loved and had that great opportunity, to work with. Now I'm going to mention somebody who has a relative here in the audience here. The father of our great Senator Gerald Neal, Sterling Neal, somebody that really broke down the barriers. During the 1950s, Sylvester had referenced the International Harvester, and Harvester was a vehemently anti-union corporation, whether it was here in Louisville, Chicago, or at the many other plants. One of the methodologies that they used to try and break unions was dividing us along racial lines. And to have the opportunity, or somebody like Sterling Neal, to stand up together to unify the workers at the plant and put on, numerous strikes and so many different efforts and demonstrations. He basically broke down that difference that existed in these plants between white and black workers. He brought them together in a way that energized so many people. And he's long recognized this. Gerald Neal said to me today, not a week goes by that somebody doesn't recognize his dear father, Sterling Neal. Sterling Neal, if you want to look him up, he's recognized in the notable Kentucky African American database where his bio is available. And let me tell you some of the things that he did, being selected for the Hall of Fame, the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. He was elected the president and the district officer of the International Union of Electrical Radio Union in 1952, basically rose through the ranks. But Neil was also a civil rights advocate in Louisville and a mentor and associate of Ann Braden. So he recognized, obviously, that intersection, that need for us to have a true relationship, a true partnership between the civil rights movement and the union movement. And I think he was exemplary. How much time do I have there, Professor?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. Well, without going through a whole lot more of these individuals that I would love to do for over the period of many hours, my dear friend Norman Hill was already mentioned by Sylvester. His book he mentioned is called Climbing the Rough Side of the Mountain. If anybody had the opportunity to read the story of Norman and Velma Hill, who was his partner for life in the movement, in the civil rights movement, in the labor movement, the intersection of these two great movements. Now look, they're trying to break down that relationship they have for many, many, many years. Those that oppose workers' rights also oppose civil rights. And that's why we have to fight so vehemently against assaults and attacks on workers' rights and civil rights. Now, we mentioned the great legacy of A. Philip Randolph and what he did. Now, Philip Randolph, of course, he was the first labor leader to start an all-black union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. He became the first African-American union to be affiliated with the AFL-CIO, and he worked tirelessly within the AFL-CIO to break down discriminatory practices and to unite the union movement together against discrimination. And he did that in a monumental way. And he influenced so many more individuals going forward. Bill Lucy, who became the Secretary-Treasurer of AFSCME, was a protege, and he was mentored by A. Philip Randolph. Bayard Rustin. And as Sylvester said earlier, knowing this history that is occupied by such great individuals and leaders really shows just how important it is for our young people, for our individuals to be more informed, to have a better idea of the history that we all share. And that history should be one of unity and solidarity. I've walked many, many, many picket lines, right, Brother Kirk? And you know what? I can tell you one thing. If you're on a picket line with your fellow workers struggling for wages and benefits and fighting unfair employers that are hell-bent on destroying your union, you don't care, and it has never occurred to folks that are walking on that picket line what color your skin is. Because in that venue, when you're a worker, you're a worker. And that's what this union movement is all about, and that's what we all should be all about. Uniting workers, whether or not, whatever the color of their skin, whatever their creed, whatever their background. A worker's a worker. And that's why the union movement and the civil rights movement are one and the same. Thank you.
I'd like to just very quickly add a comment Bill made. This is a quote from Dr. King, also in his 1961 speech to the AFL-CIO. The labor hater and labor baiter is virtually always a twin-headed creature, spewing anti-Negro epithets from one mouth and anti-labor propaganda from the other mouth. Next up is Kevin Walton, steelworker he's from Western Kentucky too. Madisonville, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Western Kentucky,
Madisonville. It's Madisonville. We call it actually Eastern Western Kentucky. I'm from Arlington. Anybody know where that is? Don't say Virginia. 6 miles east of the Mississippi River. That is deepest Western Kentucky. Kevin is part of a really interesting program that he's been carrying on with John Coombs for how many years now?
I've probably been involved with this program probably since 2016. So
and what they do, they go into schools, local public schools in the area, and guess what they talk about? Labor history. So take it away, Kevin.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Walton, and I want to get this out real quick. I am not a master. I am yet and still a student. You're hearing from folks like Sylvester and Bill Lernergan. I consider those my mentors. I consider those the masters. And, I just want to say that I, too, am still a student. of the labor movement and human civil rights. But to inspire, I've been inspired and to inspire. And that's one of the reasons why we do our history of unions for high school students. And matter of fact, we've even been to middle schools. Because, we feel that right now that unions and union folk have not done a good enough job of telling our story the way that story should be told. So we go into schools, and mainly we're going there, we're testifying, what the union can do for you, okay? It can feed you, it can clothe you, gives you lights and water. And the students, what really resonates with them, those cell phones, it can pay your cell phone bill, okay? So we touch base with the kids, how your mom and dad does it, and what are you going to do once you become an adult? We do an interactive program, and one of the main things we like to teach during our interactive program is solidarity and what solidarity means. We get some students to come up, and we'll have one student be an employee, and we'll have one student be an employer. We paint a picture, for these kids, to play their roles. The employee, he's having troubles, he or she having troubles making ends meet. So what would you do to improve your situation with the employer or with your boss? We call it the boss. Well, I go ask for a raise. And, okay, so, we have them write, we have a mock letter written up. So the employee presents the letter to the boss. The boss opens up the letter. It's got, some requests, some time off, some higher wages, some health care, things to make your life better. And this is it's a non-union setup. So that boss promptly looks at that letter, he takes that letter, rips it in half. All the other kids are stunned. Like, why did he do that? Because in reality, when you are a voice of one, that's often the outcome that you're going to have. So we fast forward, and we have the same student. We tell them, okay, now you're in a union shop. And all the other students who are just viewing, we have them stand up. And we put that student, these are your union brothers and sisters. And then we have a big book, we call it the contract book. And in this book, we call this book the Hopes and Dreams book. And in this book, it's got your wages, it's got your raises, it's got your health care, it's got your retirement. It's got everything in this book that collectively everybody has negotiated for, okay? So that is the voice of many. We explained that this book is the voice of many. So the student gives this contract book to the boss. The boss cannot tear this book up, okay? He tries, we got a mock book up there. And so I believe the students see the power of solidarity and what can be gained from it. And, I guess I got to say the reason why I got involved, because collective bargaining, unions, has done a lot for me and my family. And I feel that the utmost importance, the people that laid the groundwork, that this tradition continues. We need to inspire other people to do the work. And that's why I'm still a student, because I'm still learning. But along the way, I like to teach somebody. You know, when I first started going to, I'm also the president of a Tri-County Labor Council. But before that, when I first started going to the meetings, you know, I had 2 children myself. I mean, they're young adults now, but they would travel with me, my kids, and maybe a friend or 2. And, you know, we go in there, we have our discussions. But I got to say, the car ride home was always interesting because these kids was paying attention. You know, they had questions. So that was, you know, we need to talk more about this. And so to inspire somebody, that's what, you know, we really need to do. And that's the main reason why I'm involved. My son, he's in building trades. My daughter, when she went to college, she was in Teamsters. Matter of fact, UPS helped her pay for college. My wife, she was a member of United Auto Workers, but now she's swapped companies. Now she's a IUECWA. And, you know, they've really taken care of our family. But I think I played a part in my son joining the union, you know, for his career because he chose not to go to college. And that's one of the things when we go to the high schools, we talk about alternative careers because we know college isn't for everybody, but the union is, okay? You can make it, you know, if you got a good union job, a good union contract. You know, we talk about the skilled trades. Where I work at, a new man can come in there, fresh out of apprenticeship, and if he wants to make $150,000 a year as an electrician or a mechanic, he can, okay, with no cost. Matter of fact, our apprenticeship program that we run at the plant, a young man who's been out of school, I think, out of high school. I think he's out of high school 3 years now. And because of collective bargaining, you know, he don't start at a lower wage. This young man is an electrician. I'm an electrician also. This young man makes what I make. And I'm proud that he makes what I make because that's what it takes to make it in this world, okay? You don't need to start at a wage below poverty. You need to start where you can earn your living. So, and I think I hit, you know, we hit home with a lot of kids. And some of the kids that I've inspired, you know, I go back and check on them. How's things going for you? You know, what trade are you learning? And, you know, they often thank me, well, yeah, Kevin, thank you for getting me on this track. And I said, well, there's something you can do for me. You know, tell somebody because, you know, your friends, your young friends, your youth want to know how you making that Jeep payment, okay? How you buying these nice shoes, how you maintaining your lights and water because it's a struggle for a lot of people. Tell somebody how you're doing it. Tell somebody about the union. Tell somebody what the union offers. And like I say, you know, inclusion is a big part of it. Minorities, women, you know, we all know what it's like to be excluded, okay? I found in a union, there's the possibility of inclusion.
Thank you very much. I failed to mention that Kevin is the secretary of the Kentucky State AFL-CIO and is a member of the executive board, as is Lillian Brents, who is president of Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1447 in the Falls City, also called the Derby City. The word just jumped out at me, inclusion. Inclusion. She is also a facilitating member at large and a board member of the ATU International Pride Caucus. Take it away.
everyone, and I just want to take a moment to echo everything that my colleagues have said up here as far as welcoming everyone and having a seat at the table. This moment right here, I'm having somewhat of a full circle moment because every day I learn something new. And today I learned something new. I am a third generation union person. My grandfather worked for the International Harvest. Hearing some of that history today with Celesta being involved, Senator Neal's father, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I was like, so one of the reasons why I've always turned towards the union because I was raised in a union household. Like I said, I am a third generation. My grandfather, my father is a retired member of the UFCW, and oftentimes when he needed to advocate for his union as far as picket, boycott, or anything, he took his kids with him. And one of the dreams that he had for me was to be a leader. Now, growing up, we didn't know what kind of leader that was going to be. It just works out this way. But my journey, how I became into this role and how I ended up here, I started to do a job that somebody told me I couldn't. I'm 49 years old, and those conversations I still had. I picked a non-traditional role to become a bus driver. And I was working in corporate America. And when I said I wanted to drive a bus just because of the flexibility, the pay, and the benefits, things that my union advocates every single day. But that's why I chose to drive a bus. And when I told somebody I was going to drive a bus, you can't drive a bus. You can't drive a bus. What are you going to do with your kids? My only reply at that time, the same thing you do with yours. Take them with you. And given my journey here, so between Bill, Celeste, Dustin, Senator Neal, I'm the new one at the table. And when I started off as getting active in my union, it was because they asked me to be the financial secretary. Because those are somewhat of those supporting roles that women, they take on in the union. And being a woman in the union, when I say representation matters, representation matters. It matters. You know, it's one thing to have a seat at the table, and then it's one thing to bring your own table. Because oftentimes they tell us that, oh, you can't do that, or why are you doing that? We've always done it like this. Why are you trying something new? Why are you doing it? Oh, you don't know what you're doing. Or, you know, she has an attitude. And so oftentimes I will go home trying to figure out, like, why in the world did I pick to do this job? And I couldn't think of a reason why I should not do this job, but I always would come up reasons on why I should do this job. Because representation mattered. My voice needed to be heard. And oftentimes, you know, I've had long conversations with Celeste to where he will always give me the history of Louisville. He would give that to me without even asking, because, you know, being a part of the APRI and everything that they has come from, I didn't know it. I didn't know the history. And so when they say, if you don't know the history, you don't know where you're going. And so fortunate for me, I have had my mentors, Bill, along the way, who was able to guide me into the road that I am. And I feel like I'm just getting started. Oftentimes, you don't see not only Black people in these roles, but you don't see women in these roles. You don't see us. We're there, and we work extremely hard. But some of the barriers that are there, and it takes forums like this, the union helps level that playing field. Because regardless of what you say I can't do, that contract says we are equal. You will pay me the same. You will respect me, and I do have a voice. And so that's one of the reasons why I chose to take on a leadership role. Being in this role, representing labor, oftentimes, you see people that support you and they don't have a voice, so you seek those people out. And one of the things that we have done as far as to grow our memberships and to advocate for those strong contracts, because it's much more than representing people. It's the standard. It's the standard that we all want to live by, where you go to work for a honest day's pay for an honest day's work. That's where, because the union levels the playing field, but it also welcomes people to the middle class. This is a union town. Kentucky is a union town. I don't care what county or where you go, there's a union there. And those who have those union jobs, guess what? They have better pay. They have somebody advocating for their benefits. They have somebody speaking up for them. That's why I was destined to be part of my union. Now, I am a president business agent, and I get to do this work every single day, and it's exciting. It is so exciting, lobbying in Frankfurt, interacting with representatives, interacting with the senator, interacting with the governor. When they're seeking to be reelected, they're seeking the union out for their support, because they know the power is in the people, and the people are the power. They know who we are. But most important, we know who we are, and we know we have a voice, and so we prepare for those meetings, we advocate, we fight. But when you talk about the labor movement, there are still people that are fighting to exist today, to where they are told that they can't do something, or they should not be a part of something, or we should not recognize them. In 2025, those conversations are happening. That's what's happening now, and so we have to utilize those space and take up those conversations, not shy away from them, stand up and look at them. I said, because one thing I will say about my Kentucky AFL-CIO, they always show up. The Kentucky Alliance, they always show up. From whether we're doing pickets, rallies, advocating for a safe workplace, fair pay, those strong contracts that y'all hear about. I represent transportation. You cannot talk about grocery stores, you cannot talk about education, you cannot talk about anything without recognizing transportation. And each and every time I needed help or the support, it wasn't just my union out there. It was the unions that was out there. It was several different unions, and my greatest accomplishment would never be the work that I've done. It would be the people that I raised. And giving that, I'm a mother of 5. My 2 older kids are union members, so we now have a 4th generation that will be exercising, advocating, fighting for tomorrow. So there is hope here. There is hope. And we, just like any other thing that is going on with the way things is, and it's hard to believe where we came from and where we're at, and some of it looks the same. The hope is there, because tomorrow is already learning, participating, waiting to take their place in history. I have 4 girls. And if you know me, if you work side by side, you'll see my girls in Frankfurt, you'll see my girls on picket lines, you'll see my girls sitting on panels like this. And that's just because it all started with a union household, where they instilled those principles, those values at an early age. And so this is where we're at. And when you're talking about we're in the reaction stage, and you find the good in every reaction, the key word in that reaction stage is action. We stay active. Action. You show up. Even though you don't feel like you made a difference, it just takes one contact, one conversation to change somebody's perspective. That's what we do in Frankfurt. That's what we do as labor leaders. Somebody is not going to always see you as a person. Somebody's not going to always want to work with you. And negotiating contracts, the first thing they do is they point out everything that you're not doing. It's your union that wants to show them everything that we are doing and that they can't do it without us. We are stronger together. We continue to work, and everybody founding member of the ATU, International Pride Caucus. That came about because it was a group that did not see their voice. And they wanted representation, so they had a meeting. Then they had another meeting. Now they're having a caucus. That's similar to what we need to do and continue to do. That's what they did years ago before I came. They didn't see representation at the table, so guess what they did? They created their own table. That's an action. We need to stay active. We need to keep participating and keep showing up. And if they're not talking about what you need to talk about that day, then you bring it up.
Thank you all for coming. Do anybody have any questions they would like to ask? I would ask if you do, speak up loudly.
I have a question about the federal workforce right now and the demands that you hear in the paper.
She's asking about the federal workforce and all that's going on in Washington.
What does the union have any roles in that, and what roles and what protections are there for those workers?
Thank you.
Of course, they have a role. It's a pivotal role. One of the things that they're doing, of course, is trying to take legal action against these illegal firings. The union is trying to educate their members about not taking their phony buyout and all that stuff. You know, there's a lot of communication that goes on that the general public doesn't necessarily see between the union and the membership. And there's several different unions, of course, involved, American Federation of Government Employees and several others that are out here fighting for the rights of their members. This is, as you know and realize, it's a totally unprecedented attack on all these federal workers who are dedicated employees or just being fired wholesale by this jerky billionaire. So, you know, they are fighting back. They're doing whatever they can do. It's a very difficult challenge at this point, but, you know, there is a lot of activity going on, and there have been successful lawsuits in pushing back. Our group, American Alliance for Retired Americans, was co-plaintiff in a major lawsuit against the Trump administration that cut the funding off for all the projects that we talk about, all the federal funding and stuff. So, you know, take heart. You know, there's things going on, and a lot of it is not necessarily transparent to the public when it comes to some of the unions that are involved. And there's multiple unions involved with all of the federal work, whether it's the Park Service or, you know, whether it's protections and, you know, the police and all that stuff. So there is a lot of stuff going on, and, you know, it's a challenge, though, let's face it.
Any other questions quickly? Well, thank you very much. Senator Neal's going to wrap it up, and I'll step aside.
First of all, give him a hand, please.
Indeed.
So first of all, I want to thank each of the panelists for taking part in this. I found myself captivated, and it took me on a journey back. My father's name came up. Thank you for those kind words. But I got to tell you, this was very enlightening. It was very engaging and very informative. I want to thank each of you for your contribution to this event. Please give them another round of applause. So the title of this event is The Black Workers' Quest for the American Dream, Worker Rights and Unionism. So I think we just went on a journey that just really tells the story somewhat, but there's a much deeper story underneath. And that's the beauty of the collaboration with the Kentucky Historical Society, because they have already started a journey of going deep and will continue that study. And I won't steal any thunder here, but I'm just very excited about the collaboration that we have, because it institutionalizes and puts on track information that you normally wouldn't be able to find in one place, and that's validated, that's real, that leads to other information. So this is very important, and I think we should point that out. I also want to point out that in terms of the Kentucky Black Legislative Caucus, I mentioned that this was our part three of our event. Because of the weather, we were unable to do what was going to be part three. We're going to have 4 parts, and that was going to deal with major institutions with respect to the Black community and its journey. And if I name what the major institution that runs through the whole history, what would you say? Church. It is a primary, sustaining, active institution that's involved in every struggle. And the church in its relationship to unions is a story that can be told as well. So I think this is a very good start for the Kentucky Black Legislative Caucus with respect to what we do and what we think is important with respect to this. We remain committed to this process. We want to expand that process. I see that our chair, Representative George Brown, is in the audience. Would you please stand, and Representative Brown. I know he was over there challenged with some committee meeting or something like that, because we're navigating through this tough time. But what I want to say and what I want to leave you with is this, is that I think something very important here has been said and is endemic, if that's the correct word, to this whole effort here. And that is, and I think someone mentioned it before in other terms, you got to know your history. And what I try to get people to understand is you didn't just materialize. Think about it. That history is you. It's not really the past. It is you. It's a culmination of everything that makes you who you are at the moment. And what the moment gives us, everyone, is what? An opportunity to do better. So we must understand that, who we are standing in this space, because that lays the foundation for possibilities in the future. So again, thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you, panelists, for your participation. And now, Scott Alvey, if you will close us out.
Great, thank you, Senator Neal. I find myself, just like you, very inspired by the comments and the words here. I was actually, I was over there texting. I leaned over to Senator Neal and told him that my wife's father was involved in the labor movement in Louisville in the 1960s and 70s. So I was over there trying to figure out, what was that connection? There's these things I want to know more about, which leads me to my challenge for you when we started this off. How are you going to be empowered by history, by the history you heard today? How are you going to use that to meet the challenges of the future? I know for me already, I'm starting to look at how can I dive deeper into some of the topics I'm not as familiar with, or some of the people and the narratives that I haven't heard before. How can I go share with what I've learned with others? I'm on a great platform working here at the Historical Society, so I get to do this every day, but how can you go out and bring people to this story? I'm also going to make a plug here, since we have some journalists here. Support local journalism. Support independent journalism. Us historians rely upon that first-person account to tell us how we're going to study and understand our past. And support local history organizations. Support your local history. Support your local Black history organizations and heritage organizations. They need our help to keep carrying these stories. So on behalf of the members of the Kentucky Historical Society, I extend my appreciation to you, to the panelists for being here, to Senator Gerald Neal and the Black Legislative Caucus for bringing this event here, to our friends with the Legislative Research Commission, Mike and Leslie, who are in the back, who helped coordinate this, and then to my staff here, who really helped put on a great event and helped pull this all together, from the video down to all the conversations to how we can make this a really great and informative panel, and to all of you for taking your time to be here with us today. Thank you all very much.
Oh, absolutely, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for being here.